Welcome. My name is Joseph Hoyt, and I'm the Dallas Cowboys beat reporter for Advanced Local and Lone Star Live, and I'm really excited about what we're going to be giving you guys today. Spring had just sprung yesterday, and that means two things. I've got my light blue polo on, getting some spring colors, and that also means we're definitely in draft season. We just have just over 1 month until the NFL draft begins, and I'm excited that we're going to be giving you a whole panel and a mock draft today, 1.0, the first version of this, and we've got a good panel here. First, I want to introduce you to Mara Carey. Mara covers Florida teams, so you got Jacksonville, Miami, Tampa Bay, and she's kind of doing everything for us on the GulfLive section of Advanced Local. Mara, if you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and kind of what you do.
Yes, absolutely. So based in the Tampa Bay area, so maybe I'm a little bit impartial towards the Buccaneers, but I cover all three teams, which has been a really fun adventure this offseason. I work primarily with GulfLive.com.
Fantastic. And next I want to introduce you to the head honcho of our subsections here at Advanced Local, John Roach. John, tell us a little bit about you and kind of your NFL draft knowledge.
Well, I manage the creative chaos that you guys all stir up. Keep an eye out, obviously, a lot on college sports stuff, NFL. We got a bunch of different college teams that Josh and Jacob take care of, so there'll be expertise for the NFL draft. And then obviously Joey, Mara, and you bring the NFL expertise.
Fantastic. Next up, we got Jacob Richmond, who covers college sports here. He covers a lot of college sports here in Texas. Jacob, obviously a Texas guy yourself, spent some time in the DMV area, and now you're covering colleges back in Texas. I kind of told a lot about you, but feel free to jump in.
Yeah, born and raised Dallas, Texas. Now back covering almost anything Texas colleges related. I've been covering a lot of A&M, SMU, dabbling a little bit in Texas as we've seen fit this season. And I've luckily had the chance to see a lot of these players in action over the past several years, even as I've done some Big Ten coverage in the past. So I'm excited to get to see them on the next level. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and Jacob did a fantastic job covering the Shrine Bowl here in Frisco, and also followed the Combine. So he's got his hand to the grindstone on a lot of this NFL draft stuff. Next up, another college reporter we have is Josh Newman, another guy who's seen a lot of things. Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, born and bred New Yorker, covered Rutgers for a few years, covered Utah for a few more years. Now I'm covering Texas, newly moved to Austin about 7 weeks ago. I've just been diving in on all things Longhorns. Coincidentally, I'm in Charlotte currently to cover the NCAA tournament, but we're going to shift our attention back to the NFL draft here for a couple of hours.
It never stops. Josh, really quickly before we move on, what's your favorite taco place in Austin so far?
I don't know if I've hit enough to really have an opinion. Like Torchy's has not done me wrong. Anybody who said the Trailer Park, right? Is that what it's called? Trailer Park? Taco?
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. I got to get out a little bit more. It's been a little bit tough to get out, but I'm sure I'll find a way here soon.
Yeah, we're definitely keeping you busy between football and basketball. And then last but not least, let's go to Joey Aliberti. Joey, our podcast expert, our NFL trending guy. You have a lot of hats to wear, and now today, not only are you going to be helping us produce this, you're going to be picking today too. Joey, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, I come from Massachusetts, went to UMass, a lot of blue blood sports to prepare myself for Texas, to say the least. No, I'm kidding. But happy to just kind of do whatever, fill in wherever I'm needed. So this is going to be fun.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for tuning in too. As every mock draft goes, there's going to be some turns. There's going to be some twists. Sources indicate there might be a trade that happens in this one. I don't know. We'll see. But let's get right to it then. As you'll see, we kind of have an order. I've assigned all of our 6 panelists here different teams to pick for. And there's kind of an order with a couple jumps there in terms of expert knowledge. For example, Mara covers Florida teams. Therefore, she's going to be picking a lot of Florida teams. I cover the Cowboys, so you know that I'm going to be picking for Dallas. And then let's just jump right into it. And with our first pick, Josh Newman has the honor of selecting for the Chicago Bears. And Josh, as we know, Chicago has moved off the Justin Fields train and is now into another station. Do they shock us? Where did they go? Where do you pick for the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, no, there's no shock. I mean, even before they had traded Justin Fields to I'm blanking. Where did he get traded, please?
Pittsburgh Steelers.
Pittsburgh Steelers, thank you. Even before he had gotten traded to the Steelers, I think things were headed at least towards drafting Caleb Williams and then figuring out the Justin Fields thing. Justin Fields is now out. That clears the runway. the Bears will take Caleb Williams #1 overall. And if you need any more convincing, as we record this on Wednesday, March 20th, Caleb Williams just had his pro day at USC. Ryan Poles, right, the GM of the Bears, was there. Kevin Eberflus, the head coach of the Bears, was there. Caleb Williams was asked about the Bears, asked about Bears brass, said nothing but positive things. So we're not going to sugarcoat it, okay, guys? The Bears are going to take Caleb Williams #1 overall.
No, it's got to be the pick, and I think too with Caleb Williams, not only do you get a chance to restart that rookie quarterback clock, you're getting a guy who has the chance to be one of those elite #1 picks that we talk about, whether it be Trevor Lawrence, whether it be Andrew Luck, and someone too that's also got some weapons. And I think that Keenan Allen trade was really, really nice for them. They've got some moves to still be made before they kind of come back, but Caleb Williams is a great start. Anyone else have any thoughts on the Caleb Williams pick before we move on?
Shocking.
Yeah, shock and awe. All right, well then we'll jump right next to our next pick, the second overall pick. It's going to go to the Washington Commanders and new head coach Dan Quinn. And who will be making that pick but our lone Maryland guy himself, Jacob Richmond. Jacob,
Yeah.
Washington they also moved off a quarterback of theirs, traded Sam Howell. Where do you see the Commanders going for Dan Quinn's first pick?
Yeah, this is pretty exciting. I feel like it's not too often that we get the #2 pick and it already feels like it could be a toss-up. I feel like in past years, you pretty much know going in at least the first handful of picks. This year, I feel like it's either probably going to be Jaden Daniels or Drake May at quarterback. They're going to need a quarterback. Those two are great playmakers. I saw Jaden Daniels just completely take over game against Texas A&M this season when LSU's defense was really letting them down. Still came with a big victory. But I think I see Drake May as 2 years younger than Jaden Daniels, clearly has everything that it takes to be able to be a successful quarterback in the NFL. And even though maybe the Commanders picked Jaden Daniels because he might fit a system run by Cliff Kingsbury a little bit closer, I feel like Drake May just feels like the can't-miss quarterback at #2.
Yeah, that's a fantastic pick. I think it's tough. There's some good options up there. And obviously saying no to a Heisman Trophy winner in favor of Drake May is not the easiest thing to do. But I think that's something that, he has the look of a guy that could be a franchise quarterback. So does Jaden Daniels, of course. So it might just come to what flavor does Washington likes. And if Jacob's running Washington, that's the flavor they're going to go with. Anyone else have any thoughts on that before we move on? Would anyone else go Jaden Daniels there?
I would definitely go Jaden Daniels there.
How come?
First off, Drake May looked amazing as a sophomore. And then when it got to his junior year, those numbers kind of fell. And I feel like it was kind of a consensus that he didn't look as good in his junior tape that he did compared to his sophomore tape. Whereas Jaden Daniels has kind of only gotten better. And of course, he does have those 2 years. But I feel like the age aspect of an NFL prospect, specifically quarterback, has kind of become less and less of a thing that scouts and GMs and coaches take into account when evaluating quarterbacks.
I'm glad that you spoke up, Joey, because now we go to you, the Massachusetts guy, and New England with pick #3, Gerard Mayo now in. He's made it no secret. They're going to go quarterback, even though it's been wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Joey, where do you go, and do you go Jaden Daniels here?
Yes, most certainly go with Jaden Daniels. He was a part of the most electrifying offense in college football this year. He's made gradual steps. One thing that I love hearing about Jaden Daniels, or I think my favorite little tidbit, is something that Todd McShay always says, and how he talked to Brian Kelly, the Tigers head coach, I think it was last year. And he was just like, Jaden Daniels is really good. The one thing that he needs to work on is just kind of throwing guys open and trusting his gut and being able to make those throws. And it seems like he kind of gradually got that and is now passing that with flying colors. I just think he's a player that he's so dynamic, obviously, both with his arm and his legs. I think he's much more of a higher ceiling prospect than Drake May.
And Jacob, John, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll jump in here real quick because I'm going to go next. But it dawns on me to kind of, especially what we've seen last couple of weeks or so with the 2021 quarterback class. You're looking at these guys going here, you're probably going to see some more quarterbacks in the first round. How many of them are going to pan out? It's a 50-50 thing. Even though you think this guy's a guarantee, look what happened in 2021. Trevor Lawrence is the only one of the 5 that's still with the team that picked him as a starter. So it's that dicey thing taking a quarterback.
Yeah, I think at the 2022 draft class right now, there's 2 starting quarterbacks, and it's the first one taken and then the last pick of the draft in Brock Purdy. So, and everyone else in between is either in the USFL, has been traded. It's wild. All right, John, I don't think Arizona has a QB problem.
They will not be taking a quarterback, but they're going to make their quarterback very happy. As Kyler Murray's going to get Marvin Harrison Jr. If he doesn't make it in the NFL, I can't see. I'll be stunned. He's got the lines from his dad, who was a great NFL player. He looked phenomenal at Ohio State. Kyler Murray is doing somersaults when he sees what this guy can do for him.
Yeah, and the one thing about Marvin Harrison, though, so far, because we've got some elite wide receiver talents, and if you're Arizona and you have the chance to take the number 1, does the fact that he did not work out at the combine and didn't work out his pro day, does that affect anything, or do you think, John, that he has just totally solidified who he is through his production at Ohio State?
There is no doubt about what he can do on a football field. He had a phenomenal season at Ohio State. So I don't care if he doesn't work out between now and training camp. That guy is ready to go.
Jacob, you're a Big Ten guy. Did you have a chance, when you're following Maryland, to see Marvin Harrison play at all, or did he do anything against your Terps?
Never really got to see too much in person, and funnily enough, Maryland's been the very slight kryptonite. Though they never beat Ohio State, they always seem to make them look a little worse than they actually are. Don't look at the final scores of those games, but if you watch those first 3 quarters, it ends up looking a little interesting. But no, I've watched enough of Marvin Harrison Jr. to know. I mean, this guy he feels like a slam dunk. It's incredible to watch how a receiver can change a game like he can. It feels like there aren't many other wide receivers that can do that. Now, I think there's a lot of really good wide receiver talent in this draft, but he is, he's number 1, and I think that he will be excellent in Arizona's offense.
Joe, I just remember covering the Rose Bowl when Utah played Ohio State in 21, I think, and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave had already opted out. Marvin Harrison did not play much as a true freshman at Ohio State. Olave and Wilson opt out, and they just trot out Marvin Harrison Jr., and he had like 9 catches for like 126 yards. He was outrageous that day. Just a special talent. And I agree that he seems like a can't miss slam dunk. I'll be shocked if he does not have a tremendous career.
Josh, one follow up on that. How much was Marvin here? And obviously, Garrett Wilson, Olave, not in that game. I know Jackson Smith and Jigba was going to be the focus for Utah defensively. But how much was Marvin Harrison on their radar? Or was it, hey, this guy just might be a name in theory and we'll see what happens?
It wasn't, that's a good question. It was sort of like in the middle. He wasn't just a name, but like going into that thing, I remember talking to some guys on staff. It's like they have to be aware of Marvin Harrison in case those guys opted out. I don't think Marvin Harrison was like high on the scout, but I mean, those guys opted out like pretty early. Those guys had opted out like 6 or 7 days before the game. So the scout at that point had kind of veered towards Marvin Harrison and Jackson Smith and Jigba, but like even still, there just wasn't a lot of film on Marvin Harrison. So, yeah, that was a wild game. That was like one of the crazier games I've covered, like a late field goal. It was like 48-45 and a fireworks on offense. And Marvin Harrison was a huge part of that night.
Yeah, that was a fun game to watch. And I think it's breaking news into our newsroom that we might have a trade on the line. Mara, we're going to go live to you. Can you tell us more about this trade with the LA Chargers currently on the clock?
Confirmed. The Chargers are off the clock. The Minnesota Vikings have sweeped in. They are going to take the 5th overall pick in exchange for picks number 11 and 23. So it's clear that the Vikings need to make moves here, especially with the departure of Kirk Cousins to Atlanta. So the top priority is clearly at quarterback with Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels off the board. JJ McCarthy is going to be their guy. McCarthy put up career highs in 2023, leading Michigan to a national championship with a 72.3 completion rating, 2,991 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, and just 4 interceptions. So it's a new era in Minnesota, and it's under JJ McCarthy.
So fascinating that Jim Harbaugh's new team moves out so that his old QB can get taken as a top 5 pick. It's a little insider trading there, but Mara, tell us a little bit more about why JJ is the quarterback choice here for you and for Minnesota, because there's some other guys on the board too. If you're trading up, there's got to be a guy you like. Why would Minnesota like JJ McCarthy?
Right. I just think they've had their eyes set on him for a while now. I think it's the guy that they want. Thank goodness Arizona goes right before them, because I think that's who they really just have their sights set on. Um, I don't think it's going to be a possibility to get any of those guys before. I think they're kind of the unanimous 1, 2, and 3, and I think JJ fills in right at fourth. He had great success in Michigan, and I think it's going to translate over to the league very well. So I think they're going to get that day one starting guy. If that doesn't work out for them, they do have Sam Darnold on a new deal, kind of as that bridge quarterback. I think it's a 1-year, $10 million deal. So they do have a little bit of a buffer, but I do think that JJ McCarthy is going to be pro ready for them.
And the one thing with JJ McCarthy is ultimately, whether you question how much he actually did with that Michigan offense, they got Blake Corum, they got a bunch of other guys. They like to run the ball. At the end of the day, he led his team, or he was a part of a team that won a national championship. And I think that is something that's very attractive to NFL teams. Now we've had 4 quarterbacks go in the top 5, which is not crazy. That's definitely something that could happen. What could be crazy, though, is do we have 5 quarterbacks go in the top 6 with the New York Giants up right now? Obviously, they've got Daniel Jones. People in the NFC East, that cover the NFC East, like myself and John, who have familiarity with, will tell you that that's not been the greatest move over the last couple of years, especially the extension that's now led Saquon Barkley to Philadelphia. Does New York say, you know what, now's our time, we move off, let's go get another quarterback? As tempting as that is, me picking for the New York Giants, I don't think they make that move. There are some other guys on the board. Maybe if they trade back and, that it just kind of works out that way, add some extra competition, a little bit less money in the quarterback room, who knows? Instead, I have them taking Malik Nabers from LSU, and we're going to help Daniel Jones actually here, even though we've already seen a couple guys depart in free agency. I think Malik Nabers arguably is the most talented receiver in this draft. I think he's a guy that we already saw his connection with Jaden Daniels and what they could do over there. LSU has kind of a history of putting out really talented wide receivers. The only thing that tempts me also here is Rome Odunze, as someone who I think is a fantastic wide receiver. He's not long for the green room at this rate. We'll see what happens with him. But I think that New York goes Malik Nabers, and I think they're very, very excited about where they go with their next elite wide receiver. If anyone have any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I got a quick little thing to put in. Is just that, I watched Malik Nabers and Jaden Daniels play together, again, particularly that they came against Texas A&M, and it's hard to find a quarterback wide receiver connection like that in college football. There were some just crazy throws that Nabers was able to get on the end of, and then obviously, he measures out excellently just about everywhere. Even though I think, like we all said, Marvin Harrison feels like a slam dunk. I'd be surprised if Malik Nabers didn't have just as much success, challenged him. I think it's going to be a really, really fun to watch how both of them grow over the course of their careers.
Yeah, I think the wide receiver class in this year's draft is elite, especially at the top. We've already seen 2 go. John in Arizona took Marvin Harrison. The Giants take Malik Nabers. Now we go to the 7th overall pick in the Tennessee Titans. And now we're going to go to Jacob, who has already picked for Washington. Now you're going to go down to Tennessee, where Brian Callahan, new head coach of the Titans, they've made a lot of moves, kind of sneaky moves here in free agency so far. Where do the Titans go in your opinion?
Yeah, I think these moves set up this pick to be pretty easy, although it's not going to be the sexiest pick that you're going to hear, around and on draft night likely. I think they're going to go with Joe Alt, the offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. You're not going to have Derrick Henry anymore. Your offensive line is going to need to step up a level to keep Tony Pollard and to keep Will Levis safe, to try and be as productive, get the most out of them as possible. And I think that starts with building out that offensive line. Joe Alt's tape is fantastic. He is far and away, I think, the best offensive tackle in this draft. Again, another position that feels pretty deep, but I feel like when you watch him, what he did at Notre Dame, he needs to be the first one off the board, and Tennessee is the perfect place to land.
I think we forget with these offensive tackles sometimes, because this draft is filled with so many that, hey, Joe Alt might be the safe pick, is what some people say. But then you look at him, it's like, okay, a 6'8" guy that runs a 4.9 or however fast he ran, like that's the safe pick these days. The guy that, translates to potential Colton Miller, high ceiling type of guy. Like, it's pretty incredible what this offensive line class is. And that's hardly going to be the last one we have going in this first round. Next, we got Atlanta, which is a very fun team to watch now, because they got Kirk Cousins, they've got Drake London, they've got some options there. Joey, what do you do for Atlanta here? Is this maybe a defensive pick? Do you stay on the offensive side of the ball? What are you thinking?
Yeah, this is their third straight 8th overall pick. The past two, they took Drake London and Bijan Robinson. Obviously, the year before that, they took Kyle Pitts, and now they have Kirk Cousins. It feels like that offense is in a pretty good spot. The defense, though, one of the below average in terms of getting sacks last year. I think they need an elite edge rusher. Both of their top edge rushers, Calais Campbell, Bud Dupree, both over 30 years old. And I think there's three options in Dallas Turner, Laitu Latu, and Jared Verse. I'm going to say Dallas Turner, and I'm going to say Dallas Turner because I think he has the best combination of college tape and production and athleticism and size. I think, what is he, 6'4", 6'5", 240. Really put up some good numbers at the combine. Not that the other two aren't athletic. I just think the way he puts it all together makes him the most sought after edge rusher in this year's draft.
No, I think that's the right way to go for Atlanta. Fascinating, the third straight 8th overall pick. We need to get Elias Stats Bureau on that one to see how often that happens, because that's insane. All right, let's ready to move on to our next pick, and it's Bears with their second pick in the first round. John, they took Caleb Williams. They're ready to go there. They traded for Keenan Allen, but I mean, do we just get all the help we can for Caleb Williams here with another receiver, or do we go somewhere else and maybe fill some holes that are still left on this team?
Well, first thing we do is we send a gift card to Joey for not taking the guy I was going to take. So I appreciate that very much. Extra research would have been needed if I had to go digging, but no, they're going to go defense. They're going with Jared Verse. As you say, they've got Keenan Allen, so they don't necessarily have the same need at wide receiver that they did before that trade. They definitely have a need at defense. They only had 30 sacks last year, which was 31st in the NFL. So this is a guy who can get after the quarterback, and that's what this team needs.
Yeah, it'd be so funny if they still went wide receiver here and just said, you know what, we are just going to line him up, and we're going to get Caleb the most weapons he's had in his entire college career, NFL career. Let's just see what we can do. But I think you're totally right in terms of taking a defensive guy. Jared Verse is fascinating. We see it every year where guys kind of pop off at the combine. And, I watched every single defensive line rep, during the combine day, and there was something different about the way Jared Verse moves. And I think that's something that sticks out. Did that stick out to you, John, too?
Yeah, I mean, I just love results. He gets results. He gets after the quarterback. That's the kind of stuff, you can't coach quickness. You can't coach drive, and he's got those things.
All right, well, next up, we're going to go to Josh and the New York Jets. And this is a team that is so fascinating to me. Obviously, they put everything around Aaron last year. That lasted a matter of 3 plays. And then they kind of had to say damage control the rest of the season. Aaron's coming back. They get Tyron Smith. They look pretty ready to go. Where do you take them from here to try and get them ready for Aaron Rodgers 2.0?
So I'm just going to disagree with you slightly. They didn't put enough around him last year, and that was part of the problem. He had four snaps last year. The first snap of the season was a long run by Breece Hall. Then it was 3 dropbacks, and he was pressured on all 3. The offensive line was a sieve. So going into this offseason, you need to maximize Aaron Rodgers' shrinking, narrow window. Offensive line, you solve at least a big part of that problem with Tyron Smith. So for weeks and months, I thought that they would go offensive line at number 10. That's less of a need now with Tyron Smith. So you've got him, you've got Mike Williams on one side, you've got Garrett Wilson on the other side. I think they go for another playmaker for Aaron Rodgers. I think they take Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia, at number 10. The 2-time winner of the Mackey Award as the nation's best tight end. He's a hulking figure who can move, obviously a tremendous pass catching option. So again, if you're trying to put pieces around Aaron Rodgers, tight end is a gaping hole on the offense. I don't think Tyler Conklin is the answer. You have to go for a talented, big pass catching tight end like Brock Bowers at 10.
And I would say, aside from Harrison, Brock Bowers might be the most guaranteed slam dunk. Like, this guy's got an
He's
NFL.
tremendous.
Yeah. He has just blown people away all throughout his college career.
And I do not think Jim Harbaugh is going to be happy about that pick, because I do think that's who the Chargers would have wanted at 11. But if we can go straight into it, Joe, I can take them on the clock right now.
Go for it.
Chargers are a real interesting team in 2024. Had a tough 2023 campaign and they're seeking redemption. Unlike most teams that were struggling, the Chargers have their franchise quarterback. That's not a concern. This offseason, the receiving room took a hit with the departures of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and acquiring targets becomes the number one priority. Like I said, Brock Bowers would have been a good get for them, but they do have Rome Odunze on the clock here, and that is who I think they're going to take. Odunze was a standout. He had 1,640 receiving yards and a whopping 13 touchdowns. I think he's going to be a great weapon for LA, and I think that's who they're going to go with here.
He looked fantastic in the college football playoffs. He really jumped off the screen.
It's sort of crazy that Odunze fell to 11. Like, I was doing some research this morning, getting ready for this, and I sort of had Odunze at, well, we had a trade at 5. I would take Odunze at 6 instead of Malik Neighbors. But Joe, as you said, this is a very deep wide receiver draft. I'm probably a little biased from having covered the Pac-12 for a number of years. I saw Odunze live twice this season. To me, he's the best wideout in this draft of a deep wide receiver class.
Maybe it's my Oregon spitehood. I cannot take Rome Odunze because all I saw for the last couple seasons was him dominate us. And 2 games last year, he is incredible. The thing that's so wild about this wide receiver class, we talk kind of like Marvin Harrison, no matter what, wide receiver number 1. And I feel like with the receivers more than most positions, we see this every year. Someone just jumps up at the last second. I mean, you go back to the 2021 draft or the 2020 draft, where you had CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, a couple other guys. People forget that the number 1 receiver taking that draft was not CeeDee Lamb, was Henry Ruggs of all people. You know what I mean? It was obviously out of the league now, but you didn't expect that, and then it happened. So I think it's not out of the question that Rome Odunze would go even number 1 out of all these wide receivers. He is incredible. I think that's a fantastic pick. And that's going to be someone that kind of does really, really well in the AFC West, which is going to be filled with good receivers. Speaking of AFC West, we now have Denver, which is in a very, very interesting position. They moved off Russell Wilson. Broncos country is not riding anymore with him. They are done. There's a lot of options here. I do think they go quarterback. And here's where I can kind of get rid of my Oregon bias for a second, because I'm going to have them taking Michael Penix, and I'm just going to have them moving on. And that's who they're going to run with. There's a couple other quarterback options here. I also think Bo Nix, speaking of Oregon fanhood, would have been fantastic. I think that maybe if J.J. McCarthy falls, this is a team that could also trade up and go get a guy like J.J. McCarthy, maybe ahead of Minnesota. That could be funny to see kind of the negotiations that go there. I go Michael Penix. I think his deep ball is fantastic. I think, you still have Cortland Sutton there. You got Marvin Mims, who's a speedster, ready to go. They need some juice. They need some excitement. Why not get a guy that went to the national championship this past season with Washington?
Joe, can I ask you something?
Yes.
Why, or that last national championship game, that obviously was not his best game on the biggest spotlight. Does that game kind of concern you at all? It felt like that could have been a spot where he really could have sprung himself up into that first round range, but then he missed some throws, did some other things, obviously got injured as well. Do you think that affected his draft stock or his perception at all?
I think it does a little bit. I think teams are going to be really diving into that game and asking themselves, to your point, why did that happen? I think you also got to give credit to a good Michigan defense that played lights out that game. The other thing too about that game, not only was Michael Penix hurt, but so was Dylan Johnson, and they the running game was not really existent. And when that's the case, you can kind of do an 8-man drop and just say, hey, try to beat us with your arm deep. We're going to take away the deep ball, so you're going to have to make some tight throws in tight windows. The one thing I'll say that was a little bit off about Michael Penix that game, I know he had that one wide open look to Rome Odunze that he couldn't connect on, and it felt that there was something a little bit off. Maybe it was the injury, maybe it was the pressure of the national championship. Those are questions that teams are going to have to ask in the interview process, maybe get those answers. We'll see. I think that Denver needs to go quarterback. I wouldn't want to punt and try to get that franchise guy next season. So we'll see what happens there. I like Michael Penix. I also like Bo Nix. We might see later. But that's the direction they go for now. And we're going to stay in the AFC West, and we're going to go back to Josh. Vegas is another team that's interesting here. The signed Gardner Minshew. Jimmy Garoppolo's gone. He's with the Rams. Vegas has Antonio Pierce as their head coach. Where do you go with the Raiders?
So for a while, the pretty wide projection here at 13 for the Raiders was Byron Murphy from Texas, right? The interior defensive lineman. But that doesn't make a ton of sense anymore since they gave Christian Wilkins a big deal. So you don't really need to be spending the 13th overall pick on Byron Murphy. So then what do? J.C. Latham, the interior offensive tackle from the offensive tackle from Alabama. When you have, high quality offensive linemen, especially at a position of need, that's not something that you want to pass up. Latham was very, very good last year for Alabama. I think that's the pick at 13. Now that you're moving away from Byron Murphy, you're looking at a different position of need, offensive tackle. You go with J.C. Latham.
The board has kind of fell a little interesting way in terms of quarterbacks. But if it falls in a different way and there's some of these guys available, we're talking Penix, maybe Jaden Daniels just slips and no one trades up for him.
Right.
Does Vegas intrigue you as a QB spot, even though they have Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell there?
Because neither of those guys are the long-term answer. I might be in the minority here. You can win something with Gardner Minshew if the rest of the roster is quality. I'm not saying that you can go like 14-3 with Gardner Minshew, but you can go 10-7, 9-8, and sneak into the playoffs with Gardner Minshew. I don't think that quarterback, at least this year, right? We're not talking about 25, 26 down the road. Right now, 2024, you can win something. You can get to the playoffs with Gardner Minshew. I don't think you absolutely have to take a quarterback right now if you're the Raiders.
Well said. Well, next we go to Joey and New Orleans on the clock. Saints are another team that's, they just got Chase Young, who's interesting. So you got pass rush there with everything they're going. Where do you think New Orleans goes with the 14th pick?
Yeah, edge rusher was definitely high on that list. Chase Young kind of eases that burden. I feel like rises a couple different things up. I would say most namely on that list is offensive tackle. You could go either offensive tackle or wide receiver here. I'm going to bulk up the offensive line with Clint Kubiak getting his start with the Shanahan scheme. He probably wants that Trent Williams type. And I think Olu Fashanu out of Penn State would be that guy. He's huge. He's young. I think he'll be 21 for basically the entire football, like for his entire rookie season. I don't know the exact amount of sacks he allowed, but it's like 1 or 2 in his entire college career. He just has the traits and has everything you need to be that franchise cornerstone at left tackle. And I think with they picked Trevor Penning out of, I think it's Northern Iowa 2 years ago, and that just has not panned out. He was benched. I think he was dealing with injuries. And I think left tackle is probably the most important position that they need to deal with this offseason. And I think Fashanu is the best way.
I like it. We have now 3 offensive linemen, including back-to-back off the board. There could be as many as 9 that go in this first round. We'll see what happens. Olu's obviously incredibly talented. Struggled in the Ohio State game. That's kind of been the big bugaboo about him that everyone kind of talks about. But, it's one game. I already defended Michael Penix. We'll see how he develops. I like that pick. All right. Next up, we're going to go to Indianapolis and Jacob. We're still staying in Big Ten country with you. How about the Colts here? What do you see there? Anthony Richardson coming to year 2 after an injured first year. What do they do here?
I think Indy's going to be looking on defensive side of the ball, particularly in the secondary. I think it's just a group that still needs a lot of help, the kind of help that could also push the Colts into the playoffs very, very soon. I think where they're going to go is Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo. They've talked a lot about wanting athletic players that can really get all around the field on defense, and Quinion Mitchell is just that. Ran a 4.33 40 time, 38-inch vertical. He is as athletic as they come, and obviously his game tape is more than impressive at Toledo. I think this will be a really solid pick, and I believe the first defensive back off the board, as he should be.
Yeah, no doubt. He's fantastic. It always blows my mind. We see it in basketball all the time where guys like, I think of Damian Lillard going to Weber State, right? Or John Moran ends up at Murray State. CJ McCollum, these guys at Lehigh. How does a guy like Quinion Mitchell with that amount of speed and size end up at Toledo? And, he's fantastic. He blew me away when he ran a 4.3 40 in the combine. That was kind of my big we'll see how fast he actually runs. He's legit.
When I was at the combine, like at Lucas Oil Stadium, like watching workouts, like I don't pretend to be a football expert. Like I don't know every nuance of like watching the combine and workouts, but like Quinyon Mitchell was a freakazoid, like dude type of athlete, running the 40, doing the broad jump, vertical jump. Like that guy's a freak. That's all I know after watching like an hour's worth of drills at the combine.
Can we get Freakazoid Dude put on his jersey?
I'm going to put that on my business card. Don't steal that, all right?
Yeah, TM after that one. He's fantastic. He feels safe, even though it's a Toledo guy, of just being a guy that will step in immediately, have the speed, the size, and the ability to play with these guys. His ball skills are incredible. He had a ton of PBUs. All right, that's enough of the Quinyon Mitchell fan club, though, because I'm all aboard. We'll move on next to Seattle, and that's where we're going to go with John. The Seahawks are another very interesting team. Geno Smith there. They got Mike McDonald now coaching, former Ravens defensive coordinator. Where do the Seahawks go?
Well, we are clearly also fans of the Washington Huskies because we've seen a couple of them go off the board, and I'm going to make another one, going with Washington offensive tackle Troy Faltanu. Mm-hmm. The Seattle hasn't really filled their needs as far as what they needed to do with free agency, as far as the offensive line. So I think this is a perfect fit. With so many quarterbacks and so many skill position guys going in the draft, we're going to see some really good talented players kind of in the mid-round to late first round who in other years would be top 10 type picks. But because of the quarterbacks, because of the wide receivers, these guys are sliding down. That benefits the teams who get them.
No, I like it. I mean, to your point, another Husky goes off the board, but hey, that's what happens when you're the national championship runner-ups. He's a guy that, he's had some – if you watch some of his film, man, sometimes he just throws dudes. He's a fun dude to watch, and he'll be a fun guy to watch in Seattle as well. He gets to stay in the Pacific Northwest, literally down the street from where he went to school. So that's cool for him as well.
Yeah.
All right, next we're going to Jacksonville. Mara, another Florida team, Jacksonville. They've got a quarterback. No need to worry about that. Interesting team. They lost the Calvin Ridley sweepstakes, which kind of is a win because they didn't have to give up picks and they gave a lot of money, or Calvin Ridley got a lot of money. Anyway, yeah. So Mara, where do you go with Jacksonville at 17?
Yeah, now that the Calvin Ridley charade is all figured out, I think they make another play for receiver here. Now, they did pick up Gabe Davis and Devin Duvernay in free agency. Both are skilled receivers. Duvernay will be more of a returner for Jacksonville, which I think will be really great for him. This leaves Jacksonville with Christian Kirk, Davis, and Zay Jones. And if we're being transparent here, I don't think Zay Jones will make it through free agency with the Jags. At this point, I think the team could use a real, true number one receiver. And I think that LSU's Brian Thomas Jr. is that guy. Now, I can only imagine how general managers feel on draft night because I'm sitting here on the edge of my seat making sure nobody takes this guy off the board. That's how important I think he is for Jacksonville to get. Alongside Neighbors, which really speaks to his ability, he was still able to get 1,117 receiving yards and 17 touchdowns. So that really truly speaks to his ability. He could be a deep threat for the Jags, which is exactly what they need, especially after losing out on Calvin Ridley.
Mara, if you hear that gasp, that's the war room in Cincinnati up next because that's exactly who they were targeting. They wanted to get some leverage in the T. Higgins situation. Tyler Boyd's gone. They wanted to load up with weapons, and they wanted Brian Thomas bad. And speaking for the people of Cincinnati, we're eating our Skyline chili in anger now.
They have luck with LSU receivers, so I can't blame them.
Yeah, Jamar Chase is furious. It is what it is. Does anyone else have any thoughts on another receiver going to Trevor Lawrence? At this rate, with all those weapons, Christian Kirk still there, I don't think that there's a lot of excuses offensively for Trevor Lawrence and co.
I do want to say with the Brian Thomas front, we've seen this, I feel like, in the past, like you mentioned before, how Henry Ruggs was taken before CeeDee Lamb. So it was Jerry Jeudy. I mean, I guess Jerry Jeudy just got a great second contract, but it's not what CeeDee Lamb is going to get. But my point being that what we think or who we think are the best wide receivers don't always end up being them. And it could be those middle first round guys. Justin Jefferson went 17th overall, I think, as well. So I think Brian Thomas could definitely, he has that potential to be a top 2-3 receiver in this draft class.
No, he's fantastic. And the fact that they had him and Neighbors is wild. There's a reason why they put up a lot of yards at LSU last year. All right, well, Cincinnati's dealing with the aftershock of that because they wanted him bad, and they're going to have to make another pick here. And I'm torn between two guys. I think that they could go wide receivers still. I think if we talk about guys that rise quickly, all of a sudden, maybe an Xavier Worthy all of a sudden goes a lot higher than people expect because he can just, they've done it before with John Ross. It's speed kills. I think they stay defensively though, and they do actually. Oh, I'm torn. I'm going to go with another Texas guy though. I think Byron Murphy goes off the board here. I think that anytime they had Geno Atkins forever, who's a guy who can wreck shop in the interior D line. We just saw Aaron Donald retire, and I know that that's kind of been an easy comp. Obviously, not the same guy. Byron Murphy wasn't as fast and didn't lift as much, or didn't have the same drills as Aaron Donald did at the combine. But Byron Murphy is a game wrecker. This is a guy that played running back growing up. He's DeSoto bred, DeSoto U over here in Dallas. Went to Texas, absolutely dominated. He's a guy I think that could be a game wrecker for Cincinnati for years to come. And then we'll go to Josh on that one because he's our Texas guy. Josh, what do you think about Byron and just in the time you've seen him and just what he's been able to do and to rise in the draft to this point?
Yeah, he doesn't have tremendous size. I think I don't have it in front of me. He was 6'1". He was a little lighter at the combine than I think that people were expecting. But as you said, he's kind of ascended to this point where he is the best interior lineman, if not lineman as a pass rusher in this draft. And I don't know that a lot of people saw that for him when he was coming out of DeSoto 3 years ago, which I think maybe speaks to what his ceiling could be. He really might not be near his ceiling. And I remember talking to people at the Sugar Bowl, what do you think? What do you think? Is he going to leave? And the consensus was, yeah, he's definitely going to leave. It's just a matter of where you or how high you think he can go. And again, you were talking about maybe number 13 to the Raiders. It's just crazy, what his ascension has been, and that's why he's kind of a good example of how football recruiting, high school recruiting, is kind of an inexact science because you're trying to take this 17-year-old, 18-year-old young person and you're trying to project what they're going to be when they're 21, 22 years old. I don't know that a lot of people saw this for Byron Murphy, but he certainly put the work in. He certainly bought into what Steve Sarkisian has been telling him for his entire career. And now he's in this position. He is, well inside the first round, wherever he goes. And his combine performance only solidified his standing as a lock first rounder.
At the end of the day, dude, some dudes just ball, and Byron Murphy is a baller. And he also had one of my favorite quotes of the entire combine when he said on NFL Network that he came out of the womb ripped.
So good. It's so good.
And one look at him, and that's not shocking.
No.
He is special. And he's going to go be special in Cincinnati. Next up, we're going to go actually right back to you, Josh. A team that lost Aaron Donald. We're going to go to the Rams. They, Super Bowl a couple years ago, they went all in. Then they kind of had to take things back a little bit, but now they're also kind of in a position to make some plays. They got Puka Nacua last year as a draft steal. What do the Rams do here?
Yeah, not to throw it on you. I had Byron Murphy to the Rams. As you said, Aaron Donald retired. It just makes a lot of sense that, okay, this defensive tackle retires. You can draft Byron Murphy, slide him in. I think they've got maybe not enough pieces on offense, but I do think that they need to address some things on defense. And at some point during the draft, maybe you stop looking at what fits specifically, and you start looking at, the best player on the board. It's a bit debatable who is the best player on the board at this point. I do think that they need to go with defense. Nate Wiggins from Clemson, outstanding cornerback, has played a lot of Power 5 football at a very high level. I don't know that that's the best fit on the board for the Rams, but that might be the best player available, at least to me, the best player available based on who has been taken so far. Another
just speed guy, a little thin, Nate Wiggins, but he's a guy that looks like he can still kind of battle, with guys, even despite that kind of thin nature of his. And honestly, he might have been losing weight to run a fast 40 at the combine, which he successfully did. Him against Tez Walker from North Carolina was a very fun matchup last year. They went back and forth, and that just kind of looked like an NFL, elite on elite thing. I'm excited to see him, in that blue and yellow for the Rams there, Josh, and I think that's a good pick. Speaking of yellow, let's go right to Pittsburgh, where we have Jacob. That's the Steelers country. Let's ride, or maybe Fields country in Steelers country. I don't know. It's very convoluted. It feels like. What do the Steelers do? A team that just consistently wins.
Well, I definitely know they're not taking a quarterback this time around, so I think we'll cross all those off the list right now. No, I think that there's actually a couple different ways that Pittsburgh can go that are pretty interesting. I think they've obviously kind of changed the complexion of their franchise just a little bit right now. When you've got Mike Tomlin, you feel like you're going to be in safe hands. So now he's just got some more weapons to deal with. I was tempted to go wide receiver here. Deontay Johnson's gone now, and obviously to make sure Russell Wilson's successful, you'd want him to have maybe a few more options. But I feel like there's still so much depth left in this draft that the area that I'd really be concerned with is offensive line. Pittsburgh just released their center, Mason Cole. I feel like they're going to want to address that. And I can see Joe is not happy with me because I will have the Pittsburgh Steelers select Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. I think definitely the top center in this class, and a guy that I think still has room to grow. Again, that's something I feel like, Joe, you can speak to, but he feels like the kind of guy that could be a center for years to come for a franchise.
I think my favorite play from JPJ last year was they ran a screen pass. I forget if it was Bucky Irving or another running back, but JPJ blocked a guy, got him out of the way, and then was running stride for stride with the running back, and then did like a sprinter finish through the end zone before the touchdown even happened. He is not only is he really, really good, he's just really, really fun. That's a guy that Steelers fans are gonna love. That's a guy that Cowboys fans are already in love with and would love to see him fall to 24. And that gasp that you heard in Cincinnati just got 10 times louder from the DFW Metro because they are stunned to see JPJ go and bummed out. But that's a fantastic pick. I think that he'll do fantastic there. Another team that is really interesting is Miami because they had to get under the cap, which means they had to lose a lot of guys. Christian Wilkins, as Josh pointed out, he's already in Vegas now. Mara, where do the Dolphins go here?
Right. I think that's the question that everybody is curious about because we are really seeing some major changes right now with the Dolphins. Now, I don't think anyone in Steelers Nation is going to be complaining about getting their second JPJ on the roster after getting Joey Porter Jr. last year. Worked out well the first time, might as well go for it a second time. If he is available past Pittsburgh, I could see the Dolphins securing him. But I do think they're going to take another offensive lineman here, and I think this is one that has a major upside. We're going to go Graham Barton out of Duke University. His greatest gift and selling point is how versatile he is. He has experience in all 5 positions. He could play center. He could play tackle. He will probably end up as a guard. The Dolphins just lost Robert Hunt, which was another big loss for them. So I think he's going to move right into that spot. He's going to do an excellent job protecting Tua, and he's going to clear lanes for running back Raheem Mostert. I think it's a no-brainer for the Dolphins to go Graham Barton here.
And Mara, correct me if I'm wrong. Connor Williams still a free agent, right? Correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, so to your point, another guy that could also slide in and play center, which either guard or center, some people kind of project him for the rest of his career. I like that pick a lot. I think with Mike McDaniel's running scheme too, you got to have smart, versatile guys, and he's a guy that can move, and I like that pick.
And at the combine, he spoke a lot about being willing to go wherever a team needs him, and I think that's exactly what Miami needs right now, given the uncertainty when it comes to the offensive line. So really, a guy that's going to fill whatever hole it is they need. I think Graham Barton's the man for the job. Was
JPJ the pick before Jacob stole him?
It was, and you know what? Byron Murphy hurts them as well because I do think I think the Raiders were going to take Byron Murphy before Christian Wilkins happened, and I think it flopped right after that. I think Miami will have their eyes on him as well, but I don't think he makes it down to 21.
I made a lot of enemies today.
Yeah.
That you
Kansas
did.
City, Dallas, Miami. I'll point this out though, Mara. The stealing started when you stole Brian Thomas from me.
I did open that can of worms. I'm
Touche,
wearing-
Joe. Touche.
So hey, it all comes back to you. I'm just saying. All right, another interesting team. I feel like I keep saying it, but I mean, this team was the number one team in the NFL for a long time last year, and then it kind of just fell off a cliff. I know John.
Yeah, that was. I mean, it was painful to watch in real time because you're watching the Eagles and they're looking like, hey, this could be a Super Bowl year, and then by the time the regular season ended, I don't think any Eagles fan had a hope that they were going to win a playoff game. Like they were toast.
It was rough. Yeah, we'll see where Philly goes now though with John.
Well, have to go defense. They have to go defense. You have two new coordinators. You have an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, but their defense was pathetic last year. James Bradbury. I don't know what happened one year to the next. He is a terrible defensive back. He's still on the roster. I don't see that happening by the time the season starts. So they need a cornerback, and they're going to go with Terry and Arnold from Alabama. Hopefully he's a plug and play. Put him in. You got Slay on the other side. You've got a good defensive front. So if you can get somebody in there, put somebody in there, defensive back who can kind of hold his own, there's not that pressure because Slay's going to guard the star. You just have to guard the second best wide receiver. And if you're coming from Alabama, Arnold should be able to do that.
And honestly, a little surprising that he's kind of fallen this far. I mean, obviously, there hasn't been a huge need for corner up to this point. And we saw Nate Wiggins go. We saw Quinyon Mitchell go. But Terry Arnold has another guy that has discussions of possibly being in the number 2 corner that goes off the board. Fantastic player. I think that Philadelphia, they definitely need another corner. They need someone, that can go against all these receivers. You now have Malik Neighbors coming to the Giants in this situation. So I think that's a really good pick.
Yeah.
Next, I believe this was also traded to the Chargers, correct, Mara? Okay. So Joey and the Chargers now at pick number 23. They've traded back. They've already taken
Odunze.
They took Odunze. So talented wide receiver on the board. Now where do the Chargers go?
I genuinely think you could make a good case to go 2 wide receivers in the first round, get an AD Mitchell or something like that. I'm not going to do that. I want to protect Justin Herbert a little more, get that guy alongside Rashawn Slater at the tackle. I'm going to go, I hope I don't butcher this, Tali Fuanga. I think he's fallen a lot. There's been projections of him going top 10. Number 10 to the Jets was a commonplace. He mauled people at the Senior Bowl. He mauled people at Oregon State. He seems like one of the most safest, most surefire players in this draft. I don't know entirely about ceiling, but I would say just rock solid person. You can just plug and play instantly at that right tackle spot. I think Fuanga would be perfect for the start of Harbaugh's tenure.
Yeah, it's another guy Dallas had earmarked, ready to go, and you just swooped him. So, I mean, Fuaga's fantastic. That Pac-12 offensive line, they always talked about the Pac-12, not having the linemen in the trenches that could hang with the SEC, but we've had now, I think, 3 offensive linemen from the Pac-12 go, the former Pac-12. Or actually, that'd be the Pac-2. Fantastic player, another really tough guy. Josh, did you interact at all with? Do you remember him kind of sticking out against Utah at all?
No, not specifically. That game against Oregon State was ugly. I just remember Utah was having all kinds of quarterback troubles and they couldn't move the ball. That Oregon State team played defense. That's what really stuck out about that Oregon State team. Just a monster defensively.
Mm-hmm. And Jonathan Smith, just kind of known for creating some tough guys.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, I mean, that's one thing I think you know about Fuaga is, I mean, he's a tough dude. It's going to hit you.
Yeah.
Now we go to Dallas, who's watched multiple of their picks go in the last few picks. Offensive line is the major question mark, and I think what we're going to find to replace Tyron Smith is we're going to get the answer of whether or not they're going to move Tyler Smith to left tackle in that first round. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to keep him there. I think if the board fell the way it is, I think Dallas would like to trade back. They've got a lot of holes. They'd like to maybe, see if Kansas City wants to go get another receiver, they'll go back to 32, get some other mid-round picks. And I think if they did that, they'd take an offensive lineman there. There's a guy on the board, though, that I think would just be very fun for Dallas, and I'm just going to do it because I'm the Cowboys in the situation and I feel like it. We have Micah Parsons, who's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, and I think we're going to add who I think is the best pass rusher in this NFL draft. We're going to go Leatu Latu, and we are just going to get after the quarterback.
You're not happy about that one, Joe.
We are just going to do it. We're going to have a lot of fun with Mike Zimmer. There's going to be a lot of cool blitz packages. I think Micah Parsons lines up in the A-gap a lot, and they do kind of this double mug with Micah Parsons there, and they have Latu on one end. So we're going to have fun. We're going to go all in with Latu in this pick, and we're going to see what happens, and we're going to get after some quarterbacks.
Dallas hasn't gone all in free agency. It's about time they go all in on something.
That's what I'm saying. They got to make a move, and I think, to be honest with you, the fans right now are a little disenchanted by the fact that, we say we're going to go all in, and then we've sat back and done nothing, from the Cowboys' perspective.
Cowboys fans are disenchanted? Really?
What a concept. So I think that they need also a little bit of juice, and I think an offensive lineman here with, Marius Mims, Tyler Guyton, I think those guys would be smart picks. I think that there'd be a lot of excitement, though, about the idea of Micah Parsons and Leatu Latu racing to the quarterback. Okay. With that in mind, we're now going to go to Green Bay at 25. And that'll be you, Josh. What does Green Bay do? I know David Bakhtiari is gone, but they've kind of made do at tackle without him for a while. What are you seeing for them?
Yeah, so as we're doing this, I'm writing down names, I'm scratching out names, I'm looking at my research. I had Latu at 25 to the Packers. He's now off the board, which works out fine because now I'm going to take Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma. I think if you're the Packers, I don't think there's like a super obvious need at number 25. Again, I would have taken Latu. Latu's off the board. I'll take Guyton. Just to get Jordan Love some more protection. Jordan Love he had this really strong breakthrough season last year for the Packers. They went to the playoffs. They beat the Cowboys. It seems like they're on the way up, and Jordan Love is on the way up. So why not get him some more protection? So we go with Tyler Guyton at 25.
Very, very talented guy, very raw. Still kind of, figuring things out, a little bit of tackle. Started his college career as a tight end. Was at TCU before he went to OU, right tackle at OU. Someone had to remind me that right tackle at OU was actually the blindside protector because Dylan Gabriel was a lefty. So this is a guy that kind of has that pressure, on his shoulders and can handle it. Excited to see what he can do with his NFL career, and I think Green Bay is a good spot for him. Let's move next to Tampa Bay. And Mara, it sounded like they were a little upset with my Leatu Latu pick.
I think they're shaken up over that. I really do. I think that's the guy that they truly do want. But there is an opportunity at 26 that he's going to be off the board. So I think in that case, they would plan for Darius Robinson. Last year, rookie Yaya Diaby had a standout year for the Bucs. He led the team with 7.5 sacks. But I do think they need some spark on their defense still. The Bucs were able to retain Levante David, but Shaq Barrett and Devin White moved on in free agency. At this point, the Bucs need to focus on making life difficult for opposing quarterbacks. I think that Darius Robinson out of Missouri could be the guy for the job. He recorded 43 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery in 2023, and I think that he could be the man for the job in making life really difficult for some difficult opposing quarterbacks that the Bucs will face. And much of the offseason for the Buccaneers has been focused on retaining talent in-house. The draft really presents an interesting opportunity for them to go out and to build on what they already have going, a really great start that they had last year. So I think that Darius Robinson will be their pick at 26.
A guy who was fantastic at the Senior Bowl has really opened eyes. I believe he was the Senior Bowl MVP. He was fantastic that week. My only question for you, Mara, you mentioned Devin White going. Is this a place, too, where depending on how the draft goes, maybe we see the first linebacker off the board? Obviously, could be a little bit of a reach considering, some things. But if you look at some of the best teams in the NFL, they've got standout linebackers. And maybe Texas A&M's Edgerrin Cooper or NC State's Peyton Wilson could be attractive there, too. What do you think about that possibility?
I think there is a possibility. I do think they also have had their eyes on defensive end Chop Robinson for a while. I think that could be an interesting pick here. But I do think that as the first wave of free agency has passed, I think that need for really a game wrecker here is taking priority.
Fantastic. All right. Well, now we go to 27 in Arizona. John is handing off the ropes to Joey here, and Arizona's already got Marvin Harrison Jr. Where do you go next?
Well, Mora kind of led into it. I'm going to take Chop Robinson. I think there's a few different needs that the Cardinals really could look at. They could go a second wide receiver if they really wanted to. They kind of gutted the wide receiver room. They could go corner. I was thinking about Cooper DeJean a little bit. But in the end, I went with Chop Robinson just because he didn't have the best production. He dealt with injuries at Penn State, but he proved it at the Combine. He is an athletic freak. And I think Jonathan Gannon would just love to be able to have that young edge rusher that he can kind of mold into a beast. He obviously had that crazy good defensive line in Philadelphia. I think he's going to want to get those guys on the defensive line early and just get those studs that he can kind of compile and build up on.
Yeah, and I think if you kind of look at some of the NFC West teams, that's a pretty talented division. And at the end of the day, getting after the quarterback can be a great equalizer. And that's a team that, they with Jonathan Gannon last year, they proved that they can kind of hang with teams. They kind of punched above their belt a little bit last year, or above their weight class, excuse me. And I think that that's adding more talent like Chop Robinson could be special there.
Joey alluded to this already, but Chop Robinson was a guy, not a ton of production at Penn State, dealt with some injuries, really needed to show up at the Combine and do something. And he was another one of those guys, just a freak. And the testing went well, and the 40 and the cones just, and I think I wrote this, if you were listing like the 4 or 5 like winners of the Combine, like Chop Robinson was a gigantic winner of the Combine because, again, he's now kind of solidified his first round status based on what he did there in Indy.
Chop Robinson had a straight face when he told reporters that he was going to run a 4.4, and the next time.
Oh, yeah, he did.
That's exactly what he did. So I think he definitely proved himself in Indy.
I think the other
Maryland zone. I'll just put that out there.
I think one of the interesting things too about Chop, if you watch him, he kind of has a weird stance for a guy who's a pass rusher. He's kind of like almost sitting back a little bit, hand in the ground, where it's like I'd love to see him just 2 foot or 2 point stance and get after the quarterback. And I think it's maybe a correction that Arizona and Jonathan Gannon can make if necessary. But from the son of Arizona to the cold of Buffalo. John, at pick 28, where do our Buffalo Bills go?
Well, I'll tell you what, there are some names on the board still. Bo Nix, Xavier Worthy. The problem is Buffalo doesn't need Bo Nix. They've got Josh Allen, so they're pretty good. But another name that kind of is still sitting out there is Iowa cornerback, as Joey mentioned, Iowa cornerback Cooper DeJean. That's who they're going to take. They have holes in the secondary. It's a natural fill. Tempting as it may be to get a guy like Xavier Worthy or to take Bo Nix and figure out how you go about trading him for some value, I think you've got a need. You got a guy who fills that need. There's your answer.
Yeah, and to your point, at this point in the draft, this last 28 to 32 section, this is where you see teams in the second round trade up so they get that 5th-year option with quarterbacks. Yeah, we've seen it happen many, many times. Maybe with Bo Nix still on the board, this is where someone else who needs a quarterback comes up. Vegas, we haven't addressed that yet. There's a couple other teams where it might make sense. Seattle, if they're not confident. I mean, even though they traded for Sam Howell, but long story short, you never know who might trade up looking for a project quarterback like Bo Nix. All right, 29 in Detroit. I believe that's me, and it is. So a lot of interesting options here, to your point. A lot of guys still on the board. I think that they could also use an edge rusher, so Chop Robinson would have been good. But you know what they could do? And even though they've traded for a couple guys, they traded for Carlton Davis. I think just adding more corners, is probably just fun to do with that team and that defense. Give me Kool-Aid McKinstry. Let's put Kool-Aid in Detroit, and everyone's going to be drinking out of what they're doing. Bad pun that orchestrated on the fly, but guess what? The Lions are good, and we're just going to keep adding more talent there.
I feel like Kool-Aid McKinstry at one point was a top 20 pick in the draft, and he was really well regarded, and he's fallen for some reason. I'm interested to see where he ends up because it feels like he has one of the wider ranges of those early round picks.
Yeah, no doubt. To your point, it's always funny, like guys that we talk about, like, oh yeah, top 10 pick next year, no matter what. And then the year goes on, they play well or things. And then you start scouting them even deeper. You're like, oh, actually, now he's going to be potential second round pick. And it's like, oh, interesting. But, I think that'd be a fun fit in Detroit. All right, next let's go to Baltimore in 30. And that's going to be back to our Maryland guy, Jacob Richmond. The Ravens obviously were fantastic in the regular season last year. Almost put it together. They're still just that Patrick Mahomes kryptonite is still getting them. Where do you see Baltimore going with pick 30?
I think they're in a really strong place to an extent that it feels like they can kind of go best player available if they really wanted to. There are not too many holes on the roster, and a lot of them they have spent draft picks on the last couple of years that they just kind of will hope that they've panned out. For those who can't see, I am wearing a NFL draft cap from the year 2018. It was the year the NFL draft was here in Dallas, and it was also the year that the Ravens selected Lamar Jackson. And I think that was a lot of fun, and I think that we should have a little more fun. So I'm going to pick for the Ravens, Texas wide receiver Adonai Mitchell. I think that the Ravens, they have spent a lot of draft picks on wide receivers in recent years. Not every single one has panned out, but Zay Flowers is really starting to cook with something. They certainly need another wide receiver. I think Mitchell is a fantastic prospect. I think he is one, still in that kind of elite level of pretty much NFL ready. And I think that he would be fantastic to add into that offense. Imagine having Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, and Adonai Mitchell. That's a really nice recipe.
Josh, what are your thoughts on Adonai Mitchell going not only the first round, but specifically to Baltimore?
Yeah, has the size and the hands, and he's a route runner. And I don't know if this will translate to the NFL. He's a big game player. Okay, he played in 5 college football playoff games between Georgia and Texas. He caught a touchdown in each game. Okay, so he had a big hand in the outcome of the biggest games of his career. Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun, as Jacob said, pairing Lamar Jackson with, again, a big, tall, rangy, deep threat like A.D. Mitchell. Yeah, I'm just thinking about how much fun that would be. I'm kind of sitting here hoping that pans out now, because that would be awesome.
This was my goal. I feel like I've accomplished everything I needed to do here today.
Team fun. Love it.
I mean, the fact that they have Derrick Henry too, mixing with that, because, I mean, Jacob, you can attest to this. I mean, you got speed with Lamar and the ability to run off that. Now you just add power. The fullback's name, I'm blanking on his name right now.
Patrick Ricard.
Yeah, Patrick Ricard. He is a monster too. I mean, good luck to anyone who wants to. Do you guys know what the Oklahoma drill is? Have you ever heard of that?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
So trying to go up against like those two in an Oklahoma drill, Patrick Ricard and Derrick Henry, sounds like the biggest nightmare possible. But hey, that's what NFL defenses are going to have to deal with.
The Oklahoma drill is why skinny, small guys like me play basketball.
Yeah, there you go.
That's real if you're not a monster.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting 2 more picks left. And this is actually where I'm going to remind people, and I don't think I've actually told them yet, but we're also doing 2 rounds of this mock draft. The first round, we're almost done with it. That's going to be on video here. The second round is actually going to be in written text. That's going to be in conjunction with this on LoneStarLive and GulfLive.com. So make sure you go there, see how else the rest of this draft unfolds. I mean, honestly, I'm having so much fun. We could probably do 7 rounds, but we're going to limit it to 2 because, other people have lives, unlike me. So let's then transition now to the last 2 picks of the draft, starting with the 2 teams that were in the Super Bowl last year, 2 teams that very talented, have still some needs left. I'm going to pick for the San Francisco 49ers here. And the way this draft has fell is kind of interesting for them. They have Charvarius Ward at corner. The other corner was a little bit of a kind of hit or miss thing for them last season. You could go Ennis Rakestraw here, another Dallas kid, and I think that he'd be very competitive and worked really well with what the 49ers are trying to do. But I also think that if you look at who wrecked shop against them in the Super Bowl, it was Chris Jones and the Kansas City defensive line. especially on that right side of the offensive line. And though they do have starters there in Colton McKivitz, they signed another guy, and I think Brandon Parker is his name, former Vegas offensive tackle. I think that they have a chance to solidify that right side of the line in the current period, and then also project for the day that Trent Williams eventually leaves. They're taking Georgia's Amarius Mims at 31. Big offensive tackle. I think that they're jumping for joy at the fact that they're able to get him at 31. This is a guy that will solidify that right side in the meantime, and then be the heir apparent to Trent Williams when that day finally comes. And they feel good about their offensive line heading into a potential run at a Super Bowl next year.
And this is what we talked about before. Mims, this far down, is just kind of a result of all the quarterbacks and all the skill position players. But that is a steal if he's still around.
That feels like a steal for sure at 31.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that could go to Dallas at 24. Look at the I'll let you guys speak to this too, but it feels like with a couple of these positions, especially though with offensive tackle, it might be what's your flavor? What do you like? Because there are some standout guys that I feel like the margins between them are pretty thin.
Yeah.
I know I said this about Brian Thomas already, but Amarius Mims feels like another one of those guys that we could be like 2-3 years from now being like, why did this guy go so late in the first round? Why wasn't he a top 10, 15 pick? What were we thinking? Just because he started only 2 years at Georgia, even though I don't think he allowed a sack at all. And he's just a monster of a human being.
Yeah, limited playing time because of injuries and stuff like that, and also just getting on the field. But I think a couple weeks ago it was his like high school footage, or just him walking around at high school went viral, and just how big he was compared to everyone else. And he's incredible. I think the Niners would be thrilled with that pick. All right, final pick of the draft, guys. It's been a lot of fun, and we have one more to do in this first round before we venture offline to do the second round. Mara, Kansas City Chiefs, trying to become the first team ever to do three-peat. What do the Chiefs do?
All right, so I think it's no secret that the Chiefs still need help with receiver. Unfortunately for Odell Beckham Jr., I don't think he's going to get his long-term blockbuster deal with the Chiefs. So I think they're going to draft this year. They do have Kelsey at tight end, who famously elevates his game during the playoffs, but still for the bulk of the regular season, the team struggled to catch passes. I like the addition of Hollywood Brown. I think that Rashee Rice his success will translate to year 2, but with an additional target, the Chiefs can go from scary to downright frightening and make a run for the three-peat. I think they're going to take the best receiver on the board here. There's a lot of talent still available, but I think they're going to go with the guy whose cleats are already in Canton. I think they're going to take Xavier Worthy here. And to that, I have to ask, Josh Newman, what do you think about this pick?
Yeah, we got to like 24, 25, and I was starting to wonder if anybody was going to take Xavier Worthy. The Chiefs feel like an obvious pick at 32 if he's still on the board. As you alluded to, Mar, there were all kinds of receiver problems. It's sort of fascinating how they won the Super Bowl with Kadarius Toney at wide receiver. I know he didn't play in the Super Bowl, but point stands. Xavier Worthy throughout most of January and February was sort of this like fringe first round pick. The projection was sort of ranging from like the mid 20s into early in the second round, but then he goes to the combine, runs a 4.21, and now he's I wouldn't call him a fringe first round pick. I don't know that he's like a slam dunk lock first round pick, but I think the performance at the combine certainly helped his cause. And again, I think 32 makes sense. Very, very talented kid, very cerebral kid. Had a huge freshman year at Texas a couple years back. I think at that point, everybody thought that he could be something special, and that has panned out. So I will say I hope he does not go the way of John Ross. And I say that meaning, John Ross, I don't know that anybody thought John Ross was a top 10 pick back in 2017. If I'm wrong, somebody please correct me. But he goes to the combine in 2017. He runs a 4.22. The Bengals take him at number 9 overall. And it just didn't work out. Now, some of that was injuries, but it never felt like John Ross was worthy of that top 10 pick. Xavier Worthy is not a top 10 pick, but my point is somebody is going to spend a first round pick on Xavier Worthy based on what he did at the combine. I just hope things pan out for him better than they did for John Ross a few years back.
Mara, you cover the Dolphins. You just picked Xavier Worthy for Kansas City. How quickly before we have a race between Tyreek Hill and Xavier Worthy play out?
Well, if I had to guess, Tyreek Hill's already working on making that happen, knowing Tyreek Hill. To that point, I do think Mike McDaniel sees a fast player, and I think it's difficult for him not to take him. But the Dolphins, the last thing they need right now is another receiver. There's talks of getting a third guy, but it's not what they need right now. So I think Xavier Worthy will be going to the Chiefs, and I think we can be on the lookout for that race coming soon.
Hey, Mike McDaniel might join the race too. We've seen him run away from cameramen before. He's fast. He's got some speed. All right. Well,
is there anybody now that we've done 32 picks? Does anybody have a surprise that didn't get picked? Like you thought somebody was going to get picked, but didn't get picked?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I think if anything, this draft tells Bo Nix, if you're watching, don't go to the war room. Stay home.
Right.
Because Bo Nix not getting picked by anybody, 32 picks. I can't say. I think that could happen in real life too. Like it's just if he's not taken early, he's not going to go late because the other teams don't.
This year is Will Levis. You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy because to your point, John, he could go 12 to Denver for all we know, or someone trades up and back in the end of the first round and takes him. Shoot, I mean, maybe the Giants fall in love with a guy like that. I mean, Bo's a guy that's Oregon alum here. Like that's a guy easy to like that guy. He's got some high end ability. You never know.
Really, especially with quarterbacks, it really is one of those things. Like once you get into the 20s, those teams by and large don't need quarterbacks. So if you're not taken early and you're a quarterback, it could be a long day for you.
No doubt. To Josh's question, I think Texas A&M's Edgerrin Cooper is slam dunk, fantastic. If he's still on the board in day 2, you might have teams trading up in the second round to try and take him because I think we've seen kind of, a couple of years ago, everyone said, hey, devalue the linebacker. It's not as good. It's not 3 downs. It's not what it used to be. And now we're seeing with the likes of Fred Warner and Patrick Queen and some of these other guys like, oh, hey, no, actually, you need a good linebacker if you want to play. He's a guy that if the Cowboys had filled some of their needs, that I would have had no problem with them taking him at 24. That's a guy I think is fantastic. We'll see what happens there. Joey, do you have any ones that stick out to you?
I actually have 2. First one is Johnny Newton out of Illinois. He had 7.5 sacks this year. He could be the best pass rushing interior defensive lineman in this class. I don't know. I thought the Texans were going to be a shoo-in for him, but then they obviously traded out. So I don't know there. The second one I want to bring up is Ladd McConkey. I know he's not like kind of a consensus first round pick at all. I just think he's killed it at the Senior Bowl and the Combine, and he was one of the most unguardable players at the Senior Bowl. I just think his route running and the way he cuts through on slants, ins, outs, whatever it is, I think he's going to have a very productive NFL career.
I didn't know he was that fast.
Yeah.
I knew he was good and quick. I didn't know he had that straight line speed. And I was like,
but his skills, you're exactly right, Joey. His skills translate just into the way the NFL is playing these days. You put a guy in the slot there, who's going to, a linebacker going to keep up with him? No. And it's, a safety or cornerback, like he's got moves. So I think you're right. He's got a long career ahead of him.
Him on a team that has already 2 other receivers on the outside and you like really good ones, like that could be scary. Put him in Miami, right, Mara?
Yeah.
There we go. I think it's also surprising that Cooper DeJean fell the way that he did. I think he's going to be a good get for whoever gets him. And I'm surprised that he fell to the second round.
I think someone took him, whoever had the 28th pick, the Bills.
Oh, I had Bo Nix. So I had you taking Bo Nix with that pick, and I thought Buffalo was going to explode if they take a quarterback in the first round. So now it's really clearing up for me. Okay.
You would be right. Buffalo would go crazy if they took Bo Nix.
Yeah.
They don't need the Mafia going after Bo Nix. We're good.
You're 100% right.
Jacob, you got any picks that kind of or players on the board that you're looking for in round 2?
I think I'll just re-up there with Edgerrin Cooper really quickly. Like you said, I think that a lot of people, linebackers become a bit of a devalued position. But if you want to know how much a player like Edgerrin Cooper can impact a game, to go back and watch this past season against Alabama, I think people have brought it up. It's one of the most impressive game tapes you've ever seen from a defender. he's excellent all across the field. There's a chance someone who likes him enough could make him an edge rusher, but I think that as a pure linebacker, he just has the ability to take over a game. I'm so interested to see where he ends up. As someone who's followed the Cowboys a long time, if they were able to trade up for him, I think that he would be an excellent fit. He's the kind of guy that changes their playoff exit, having a linebacker there who can really just control the field, big bodied, sure tackler, that kind of thing. So he's 100% the one I'm looking at for round 2.
Last one I want to go to really quick, Josh. There's a couple Texas guys that will go in the second and third rounds, or a few. I want to get your opinion, two guys in particular. Tight end Jatavian Sanders, who, if you go back and look at his high school tape and watch how many one-handed catches he made, it's incredible. And then obviously Jonathan Brooks too, a guy that could be still, despite the ACL injury, and he'd probably be ready, could be the number one running back off the board.
Yeah, Jatavian Sanders, for those that don't know, sort of an interesting story. He was pretty much ready to play defense in college. He was recruited by Tom Herman. Tom Herman gets fired. Steve Sarkisian comes in. Sanders wants to play for Sarkisian, but Sarkisian tells him he wants to play offense. And not only does he want him to play offense, but look, you're not going to redshirt, but you're not going to play offense as a freshman. You're going to play special teams. We're going to teach you essentially how to play tight end as a collegian. 3 years later, this kid is the number 2 rated, pretty much the unanimous number 2 rated tight end in this draft class behind Brock Bowers. Did not have a tremendous combine, but from what people have told me, he was good enough at the combine where he's not going to fall below that number 2 rated behind Bowers. I would expect him to go in round 2, somewhere in round 2, maybe in the early 40s. And then Jonathan Brooks, again, for people that don't know that story, he had sort of this crazy ascension in the post Bijan Robinson days at Texas. Brooks becomes the number 1 running back. He's got 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns when he tears his ACL in game number 11 against TCU this year. He was going to leave, but should he come back with the ACL? He ultimately decides, no, he's going to go through the draft process while rehabbing. Said during the combine that he is ahead of schedule with rehab. Wasn't well enough yet to work out at the combine. Texas had their pro day today, Wednesday. He's in Austin for pro day, still not well enough to run. But his goal, if I remember correctly, I think he had a loose sort of target date of like July 1st to be ready. And if July 1st doesn't happen, if he's close, he thinks he's going to be ready for training camp. Still the number 1 running back on the board. No GM, no pro personnel has any like major concerns about the injury. The injury was very straightforward. Structurally, his knee is fine. So again, very quick ascension for Brooks last year at Texas. Sad what happened to him late in the season, but doesn't look like it's going to impact his pro prospects, at least early for his career.
Yeah, well, I know he's a guy the Cowboys are definitely keeping an eye on as a potential pick there. And I also know that if we're giving draft grades for that first round, I give you all A's because that was fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time. That was a lot of fun. Obviously, we're probably not going to hit this completely accurate because the draft is crazy, but I think we also had a little chaos here, and it was fun. Tune in to LoneStarLive and GulfLive.com as we provide the second round of our mock draft. Really excited to see where that goes. We're going to do that soon after this. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Tune in for all our draft coverage and coverage of Texas colleges, the Florida teams, New Orleans, Houston, and, of course, the Dallas Cowboys as we continue towards draft, which is in almost a month. So thank you again, everyone, and have a good day.